I don't know if you saw this the other day, but we had a show during the New Hampshire primaries, and we had three great guests. And there are some of my favorite people. There were topic that we're talking about. Don DeBar, Kim Iverson, and Mel K from the Mel K Show. And what was great about it is they all had three different perspectives on what's going on. My friend Don DeBar happens to be a Marxist of sorts, but I know when some people hear the word Marxist, they get a little scared. But he's a down Marxist. He believes in freedom of speech. He believes in freedom of the press. He's all about Julian Assange and his rights. He's an analyst, leftist of sorts. So he really has a great perspective. And I think when people think this whole Marxist thing in their mind, they think of a culture war. No, he's more about labor. And that's something we'll get into on another day. Mel K, she has some ties to Donald Trump. She knows him personally. She's considered part of the populist right, even though all these people that were on, I consider them independent thinkers. So Mel K has a different perspective on the border crisis. And this is the reason why we want to talk about the border crisis, is because when it comes to Republicans, this is their number one issue. And then, of course, we have my other good friend, Kim Iverson. You might have seen me sub in for her on her show. She's been on this show plenty of times. She's somewhere in the middle, another independent thinker. But we're going to start off with Mel K, correct? Let's do Mel K and let's see what she has to say. And let's talk about these three different perspectives about the border crisis, what's causing migration, how do we fix it, how do we feel about it, how do we identify with it. Take a listen. This is Mel K. She's going to go first on the border crisis. This is a hot topic that we're talking about. I still digress to the point is they're here because we're there. And that's my biggest argument. But give us your thoughts on the whole topic itself, Mel.
Well, I mean, obviously, wherever you and Kim get your data from is different from where I get my data from, which is fine, where we deal with different people. I've been dealing with Todd Bensman and other people that are down at the border. Michael Yon and Ann were just down in Panama for weeks and weeks. What really is happening is a lot of people are coming through Panama and coming through Venezuela and then coming here. The amount of people from Africa, and these numbers have been out there. I don't know. You'll have to send me what you're getting, Pasta, because that's not what I'm getting. Also, there are a lot of getaways and other things. And what you're talking about is one aspect of it. And of course, I lived in California for 20 years. But again, if it's not bothering you, that's fine. But I lived in Manhattan. I just left Manhattan. Manhattan is teeming with people from all over the world, all over town. It is, if you go there in person, you will see that it is affecting life in New York City dramatically, as far as I'm concerned. On top of that, the other thing that is not being talked about is there are 300,000 children that are not being looked after they cross that border. We don't know where they are. Another thing that's happening, I don't know. For me, I look at it more like the Cloward Piven strategy and what is happening in our hospitals, in our schools, in our social services. A lot of this money is being diverted, but my take is very different. And I don't know what right-wing populists you're listening to. I don't know who they are, but what I believe is that this isn't about any of this. I honestly still believe that we are talking about Agenda 2030. We're talking about the destabilization of now this country. What you guys are saying about what and I'm curious who we are when you and Kim both say we are, because I see a different we that has captured our entire country and many other nations. I see them as something that is running as a global parent company of planet Earth at the moment. The multinational corporations in bed with the banking cartel, I feel like, have infiltrated all of our nations. But things like the Treaty of North America, things like a lot of the things the Trilateral Commission has been behind, a lot of things the Open Society has been behind, a lot of the money that is going to pay for the border is coming straight through U.S. taxpayer dollars, and a lot of it through the UN, which we happen to fund. And frankly, I think America is in the middle of a color revolution, as we have orchestrated all over the world. You and I have done whole shows on it, Pasta, about CIA, National Endowment of Democracy, taking down duly elected governments, including Ukraine and Libya and all over the world. I feel like that's happening to us right now. So when I look at this whole thing, I think they're using the illegals as weapons against us. And when people are telling me and sending me information that the same people who funded Black Lives Matter and all these other uprisings are planning already and recruiting people within these communities to have an uprising in February and March with the hashtag demand citizenship, I believe it, because I think that the powers that be that see America as the problem to getting global governance and the one world governance that they have on all their Agenda 2030s see America as a problem. And if America is destroyed from within and we're fighting each other, we don't stand up for this nation, we don't understand what's going on, well, it's very easy to turn us into Venezuela. And I'll just finish on this. Not too long ago, I was in New York City and I live near the UN, as you know, and I was sitting at a restaurant. Right next to me was a bunch of guys that just came down from the IMF meeting. I think the we is the global public-private partnership. Many of them are the billionaires in America. And these three guys are sitting next to me. I obviously know they're from the IMF meeting, so I'm eavesdropping on them. And then they started talking to me, and I go, "Oh, are you guys meeting to discuss turning America into Venezuela?" And the guy laughed, and he goes, "It's going to be much worse than Venezuela in America. You guys better get ready." And I believe that he meant it. So when we're talking about I believe that we have been usurped by a power that's running above our government, and that's the enemy to me.
All right, so there you had it. That was Mel K with her opinion. What's going on? I think a lot of people on the populist right, and I don't want to put everybody in a box over there because I kind of got accused for doing so a little bit. And Mel is right. Everybody has different opinions about what they think is actually going on. We'll talk on that night in particular when it comes to immigration coming into this country about how I feel that we need to go to the source of the problem, and the source of the problem, I believe, is our American foreign policy. We have all these bases, over 100 of them now, down in Latin America. We keep these countries very destabilized. Why do we do that? So we can then extract their resources, the Western corporations, for pennies. Then we can also slap our monetary system on there, give them ridiculous IMF loans they'll never pay, and have a reason to take those resources from them. So that is my personal opinion over there. Now, what happens when they come here? That's another question. I don't believe in this replacement theory that a lot of conservatives might believe in. Maybe independents think about that too as well. I just believe these people here are coming for a better life. I think Donald Trump is kind of feeding into people's, biases of sorts. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people are on the populist right, are very concerned with people coming across the border. I don't think the majority of them are criminals. I think the majority of them are just coming for a better life, and we owe it to them when we take the resources and keep their country destabilized. So that's something I want to point out. That is my personal opinion. Mel feels a little bit different about it. I do appreciate her point of view, but it's something we all talk about in the next coming weeks, as this is the number one hot button issue when it comes to conservatives. Let's get to Don's opinion now, because Don is one of those anti-imperialist leftists, been to Latin America, different countries. He understands what's going on. I really align myself with Don's opinion here. I think Don DeBar compartmentalizes this part so well and explains it very, very perfectly. Listen, if you're the party of individual responsibility, the conservative party there like that, shouldn't we take responsibility for our foreign policy? I'm not saying that we have to let everybody in here and that we shouldn't check who's coming in, even though I believe the majority of the people are just coming for a better life and to send some money home. I just believe that we have to be accountable for our actions in their land. So if we're occupying their land, right, we're over there, and if we weren't there, they wouldn't come here. Let's listen to Don DeBar's position on migration to the border. And thank you, everybody who's watching. Hit the like button, hit the share button. Let's continue to grow these numbers. Let Don jump in here really quickly, and let's get his opinion about what Mel just said.
I don't have an opinion about this within the framework that is being discussed. I see this much differently. Start from the fact that you have two areas you have to focus on. One, everyone we're talking about is a human being. So, that gets lost in the sauce. However, being a human being doesn't just mean that you're entitled to all the things that we are all entitled to: food, clothing, shelter, etc. And it also entails certain responsibilities. It also entails certain rights where you are. The thing that initiates the movement of people here, first of all, generally, is either the fact that the U.S. government or some other puppetry of the U.S. government, and let me be even more clear, the people that make policy and control the U.S. government, the places that they target their bombs and their coups d'etat and their foreign policy and their global economic policy creates refugees. People don't generally leave their home and their family to travel thousands of miles away unless there is no other viable alternative for them to survive. And so that's at the head end of this. The people in the Congress and the president and the bureaucracy in corporate America and the DNC and the RNC and everywhere else who seem paralyzed in terms of dealing with the human cost, both to the people who are refugees and to the communities who are already starving, that they have to now share their crumbs with in order for people to not die in the street. There's some people that are making a big profit in terms of money and power over this condition. They are making the policy that creates the motion, that drives people into motion and puts them at the border. And they're making the policy that allows the gates to open and close at the apparent whim of the bureaucracy. So we're paralyzed in terms of making policy. That's a crock of shit. What we're looking at is the result of policy. So then we have to, because, okay, what are some of the impacts? The obvious impacts are at the place where the people are being driven from, the wages are depressed there because you have dictatorships that basically dictate how much people will get paid, and an economy that generally results in you dig out the wealth under the ground here and take it to the ship so we can send it back to America and shut up. That's in essence the life for the people that don't flee from these places. That stuff comes here. Some people coming here are just following their stuff here. The wealth that used to exist in their country is dragged here, and they're hoping for some trickle down when they get here. That is part of the dynamic also. Then when they get here, the arrival of another 100,000 or 1 million or 5 million workers in a labor market already with depressed wages and few opportunities, that problem is now exacerbated. It has nothing to do with the character or nature or habits or language or whatever, dietary habits, nothing to do with the character traits of the people who are arriving. It's the nature of things. If I've got 10 jobs and 100 people, 90 people are shit out of luck. And the 10 that work are going to work and shut up so they don't end up part of the 90. This all benefits the same group of people. They make money on the weapons. They gain control of the natural resources in these countries. They gain stronger control. Remember, unions used to be powerful in this country. How do you think they were driven to the state that they are now? Mechanization is part of it. But there are so many jobs here where there's no mechanization and the wages are half or even worse of what they were even 20 years ago. Again, it's not the fault of the people that got here. They're victims of the same people that we're victims of as workers here. And so we have to look at this in a holistic way. And if we're going to solve it, we got to understand who the enemy is. And that's what we have to deal with. This political process ain't going to do shit.
Wow. Don DeBar, ladies and gentlemen, my paisan, my Goomba. This is why I love this guy. He's always been a mentor. He's right. A lot of the people that are coming here are following their stuff. We extracted the Western corporations. That's our government doing so for many years. If you just look at Guatemala, for instance, when they had their own revolution, well, Arthur Dulles, who was head of the CIA and invested heavily in the United States Fruit Company, convinced Eisenhower to go in there and remove that government. So the UFC got back in there. And I'm not talking about the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I'm talking about the United Fruit Company, which eventually split and became Dole and Chiquita. And that's something we have to understand. We are causing the problem, not us individually, but our government. And a lot of it has to do with ignorance, that we don't realize what we're doing. Well, how do you think all those facts get here? You think they're just handing them over? No. A lot of those countries, more than anything, on both sides of the aisle, when I go down there, they want national sovereignty. They want to have a right to decide what they do with their own resources, how they run their government, and they don't want the United States sticking their nose in their business. That is the big problem. And that's something that we need to get away. We need to start digging into. We need to get away with. What do we do when they're here? There's an invasion. Oh my God, they're trying to destabilize us this way. No, the majority of those people are great people just looking to better their lives. And Kim Iverson will talk about this too as well. She's very right. When they get here, a lot of them, they become the Rubios and the Cruzes of the United States. In other words, they're very, very conservative. And they don't necessarily just back whatever a Democrat says. A lot of the Christian people that come over, very, hardcore Christians, Catholics, excuse me, they don't want to get on the Democrats bandwagon because they don't like personally their stances on the LGBTQ community. They don't like that stance on abortion. So they're not just going to easily become Democrats. So that's something to consider. But at the end of the day, I believe, as Don DeBar believes, that our foreign policy is driving migration to the border. You can't just close the border, ladies and gentlemen. You have to close the bases. We have to change. We do our foreign policy, and we've been doing it for quite some time. The Monroe Doctrine is alive and well. We haven't changed a thing. And Donald Trump was weak on foreign policy in Latin America. He went with rules and laws and sanctions and hired the same people like the Elliott Abrams. He tried to whack Maduro. He labeled Cuba a state sponsor of terrorism, and he did nothing when the Bolivian coup was taking place. And there was a lot of United States tentacles, people like Mark Rubio, working the phones for that coup. So this is a hot button topic. We're going to have a lot of conversations between now and November about this. I would like to ask Donald Trump his position on why, if he thinks that our foreign policy is part of the reasons causing this problem. But he says stuff like these shithole countries, and people just think that they can't get their own stuff together, and that's why they're coming here. No, the United States foreign policy apparatus, the Western corporations, not to mention, we talk about exploitation of the cartels. Well, who exploits these people more? The corporations who exploits their labor or the cartels? You know as well as I know that they are exploited more by these corporations. I'm very serious about this issue. This is one of my top issues over there, ladies and gentlemen. I've been going down to Latin America, and as I've been here in the United States, I've been trying to prove that the United States elections are false. And I've been going down there trying to prove that their elections are real. They have a way more representative of democracy down there in Latin America than we do over here by far. Transparency, the board, a chain of custody, 1 day of voting, everything the conservatives or the populist right wants in an election that Donald Trump lost, it takes place in a lot of countries in Latin America. And in those same countries, we're still interfering. Shame on us. We need to take back our foreign policy and reel it in big time. This isn't about the replacement theory in my mind. This is about United States foreign policy taking advantage of the resources, giving it up to these Western corporations. Those Western corporations are exploiting these people with their cheap labor. The same people who are screwing us are screwing them. Don DeBar said it, and it can't be any truer. Let's play Kim Iverson's point of view, because it's a great point of view, because she talks about actual data on what people say these people are actually going through. Listen to Kim Iverson. I think what she has to say is awesome. And how to get this across to the populist right so they understand that the border is just only one part of the equation.
I mean, obviously, we see that the border has, with all immigration, even across the globe, foreign policy has a lot to do with that. I don't know how Europe hasn't turned on us yet, because they're the ones who've absorbed the majority of the people from the Middle East, from Ukraine. It's been on their shoulders to bear the brunt of all of these people that are fleeing from conflict that we create or that we instigate, right? So Europe, I think, is really but we're also seeing at the border, the southern border, it's not just historically had been it is still majority Hispanic people crossing through the border, the southern border from Latin America and Central America. But we are seeing this influx from other areas of the world, and it's very kind of befuddling. Like, how do people from Africa get all the way over to the southern border and then they cross through the southern border? So there's clearly a problem there. But obviously, when we are destabilizing countries, or not even just through war, through foreign policy, but also economic policy, when we sanction countries, when we siphon their resources, when we topple their leaders, when we stage coups, and it creates instability. And that's been a U.S. foreign policy sort of ethos for a really long time, which is keep places destabilized, because if you keep them destabilized, they won't rise up and become powerful. And when they become powerful, then they can rival you. I mean, that's what we see with Russia and China, is that they're powerful, China in particular, and they give us a run for our money. I mean, they're competitive with us. So people don't like that. They don't like the competition. They like to remain the number one power. They want to be on top. So, you know, we've had this, and that's what we've seen throughout the Middle East. It's been a destabilization effort in order to keep certain players from rising up and actually challenging the status quo of whoever we think should be in power in the Middle East. So that destabilizing effort, of course, is going to cause people to flood through the border. I mean, look, my particular stance on it is the first thing, and this is what I said on Jimmy Dore show that was not popular, so it's probably not going to be popular again. Is okay, I get it that there's a lot of people coming through the border and they shouldn't be coming through an illegal process. We, however, have the worst Congress on the face of the planet. I mean, I don't know if it's on the face of the planet, but it's really bad. It's definitely the most ineffective branch of government in this country. They just are useless, completely useless. So they haven't changed immigration policy in decades, really effectively. So people are going to just skirt the laws because the laws are antiquated. They're not up to date. They're not modernized, and nobody gives a shit. I mean, honestly. So the first things first is that obviously they need to fix the laws. But besides that, besides the fact that it's illegal, I think we have to ask the question of why do we not want these people here? And that's the only thing I said on Jimmy Dore show is you just have to show me that their presence here is a negative thing. I'm willing to assert that it is. I mean, if it is a bad thing, and if you could say, well, it leads to lower wage, like we can actually not just think it leads to lower wages, but we can actually prove that their presence leads to lower wages, that their presence leads to problems in this country that are legitimate, not just one-offs, like, oh, this guy killed somebody and he was an illegal, so therefore they should all go. You have to show me that there's a genuine economic, social, cultural problem that is being developed in the United States because of these people directly with data. I don't want to hear bullshit of like, I think so. No, I want data. And then if you could prove that it's a real problem, then we need to correct that problem. But there's a chance it's not. And that's something that people need to kind of contend with, is that there is actually a possibility that the presence of all these people builds our country. And it goes against the narrative of all these foreigners are here and it's a white replacement project, and suddenly people aren't going to be white or whatever, and our culture is going to be different. I don't believe that Latinos, Hispanics that come to this country change our culture. I think they integrate quite well. I think they turn into Marco Rubios of the world and Ted Cruz's of the world. I think they're quite conservative, and I think they're just like a lot of conservative Americans, in fact, especially if conservatives embrace them. I think that they work hard. I think they're family oriented. They're religious. I think that they're very aligned, actually, socially and culturally, with the vast majority of Americans. But so I think that there needs to be a real, true data-driven analysis of, is it bad that these people are here? If it turns out against a lot of popular thinking that they're actually a positive presence in the United States, then we need to pressure Congress to change the laws. Then it wouldn't be illegal anymore. Yeah. But I mean, well, I could go either way. If you could show me the data either way. If it turns out that their presence is horrible, fine. Yeah. Then let's fix it. If it turns out their presence is positive, then fix it.
So there it is. This is an area. You can bring me back in, Jamie. All right. There it is. Kim Iversen, her opinions. She also mentioned the sanctions and the blockades of these countries that are really, really adding to their stressful situations. We also support the NED. The CIA supports these murder death squads over there, turning these countries into chaos. I've been saying this for quite some time. So we're the cause of this problem. There's people who are benefiting on it, just like there are people who are benefiting on the fact that there's more homelessness out there. If they can find a way to benefit off people's misery, they're going to do so. And that's something that the foreign policy apparatus, the deep state military industrial complex, has done for quite some time. But what I think Kim was saying is something we should really look at. Are they really a negative, impact when it comes to the United States? You hear Donald Trump say these things, and I can't stand it. What Donald Trump says is, they're sending us their worst. They're drug dealers. We don't know who's coming across. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, listen, we don't know exactly everybody who's coming across, and I think we need to look at that. But to imply real boat ride, like when Castro supposedly emptied out his prisons and his mental institutions and sent everybody to the United States, to act like everybody coming across the border is a criminal is this kind of trope. And I think that he needs to change that language. Just like when he says the China virus. I mean, this is a homegrown virus. Ralph Barrick, EcoHealth Alliance. Yeah, I understand China has a part to play, and we can question that. But we understand that this is a homegrown virus and it's been here for quite some time. They've been working on these bioweapons. So Donald Trump, when he has this rhetoric about China, when he has this rhetoric about these shithole countries, we really need to check it. What Kim's pointed out, let's look at these people out there. Are they really driving wages down? We know and we understand there's a lot of work out here that Americans just simply don't want to do. Pool cleaning, large yard work, fruit picking, all that stuff, agriculture. There's a ton of work where Americans just simply won't do the job. And, you know, whether it's they're lazy or it doesn't pay enough, and we can argue those things, but are they really driving down the wages? And if those wages are being driven down, who's benefiting from that? You're right. The same apparatus of the people who actually destabilize those countries and send them here. Something to talk about, but that was Kim Iversen, that was Don DeBar, and that was Mel K. That was a talk about foreign policy, a conversation that should be a hot topic till November and then some.